Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 743B. And today's date is August 17th, 2015. And the title of this episode is Russia Supplies Syria with MiG-31 Jets to Protect Syrian Airspace. Let's get right into the economic collapse geopolitical news. Now, I wanted to talk about GMO foods. Now, I mentioned GMO foods in a couple of reports. I don't talk about it that often. And I kind of live a life where I do not like GMO foods. I try to eat organic. I try to grow my own things. I make my own type of food. And I kind of steer away from it. Even for my children, I really don't want them eating that type of food because, again, the scientists are messing with the code of life. We don't know what the long-term effects are, and they really can't tell you what the long-term effects are, especially when they're intertwining the code of life with poison in the food, and they have no clue what's really going on. And, of course, they're trying to convince you that they do know, but they really don't. But we understand the U.S. representatives, the House of Representatives, passed the H.R. 1599, the Safe and Accurate Food Labeling Act of 2015, which means that basically they don't want states demanding companies like Monsanto and others to label their foods because they don't want people to know. Now, I have every right to know what is in my food, what's going into my body, and that's why I need a label on it. And it seems that 70% of physicians say GMO foods should be labeled. A recent poll by Physicians Association revealed that more than 2/3 of doctors are also in favor of mandatory GMO food labeling. The Sermo physician community conducted a poll of its members asking the question, should food manufacturers be required to label products containing GMOs? Of the 2,097 physicians who responded, 1,400 answered yes. So we can see that most of the foods in the United States, roughly 90% of cotton, corn, soy grown in the U.S. is genetically modified. And we can see that people are getting upset. People are saying these foods need to be labeled. And we have every right to know what is going in our bodies. And when people say, well, the FDA and all the agencies, they approve it, it has to be safe. But we have to remember, when you go back in time, the FDA gave each company the ability to test their own products and say that if these products are safe or not. And if we go and we look at the FDA and we look at what they have approved over time, we see that a lot of the drugs, a lot of the chemicals that they put in food, they've said it's completely safe until there's cases, lawsuits that say otherwise. I mean, here's some examples, like Accutane, on the market for 27 years, 1982 to June 2009. And basically it was taken off the market because of birth defects, miscarriages, premature births when used by pregnant women. Inflammatory bowel disease, suicidal tendencies. There were 7,000 lawsuits against the manufacturer. And we have many other drugs. Baycol, Bextra, Silert. These were all approved, saying they were completely safe and you have nothing to worry about. The chemical 7 that was used to kill bugs, completely safe until they realized it caused cancer. Asbestos was allowed into buildings to be used as insulation until they realized it caused cancer. So just because they're saying something is safe now, doesn't mean it is. And this is why each person needs the choice to say, okay, I will accept this, I will not accept this. But when you take that choice away, you're removing part of our rights. That's what they're doing because they don't want people to make their own choices. We understand the government is still pushing TPP, and we see protests popping up all over the world. In New Zealand, 3,000 people protested against the TPP because they know it's not for the people. Other countries, Australia, Mexico, Taiwan, South Korea, and Malaysia, all had protests because the TPP has been kept secret from the people. And when you keep something a secret, you know it is not for you. We see the IRS has come out and said there are more unauthorized access to their records. They first thought it was only about 100,000 U.S. household tax returns. Now they're saying there's 600,000 breaches. And of course, it's all Russia's fault. And we know this is complete propaganda to get CISA passed. And they're continually using this to get their legislation passed. Why would Russia care about the tax returns? Actually, they only got surface information, by the way. But of course, they're going to use this, like they use everything else, to convince you that we have this major problem. Maybe if the NSA didn't have all these back doors, or if the NSA, maybe they're the ones who are actually breaching the data, trying to blackmail somebody. Because we know they've done this before. Dianne Feinstein is continually out there trying to censor information on the internet. She's worried that net neutrality will block ISPs from censoring terrorist content. So this cannot happen. She wants certain information censored, and the government will make the decision on how to do this. And of course, this is in violation of the First Amendment. But they're going to use the same story they always use. It's national security. It's harmful to the people. Well, let the people decide that. We don't need a government. They're not our mother or father. We put them there to manage the country, not to make decisions for us. So guess what? We can make our own decisions. We can make our own choices. If we see something and we don't like it, we don't look at it. Just like radio shows, TV shows, movies. This is why some movies do fantastically and some other movies don't do so well. Because people say, you know what? It was terrible. I'm not going to go to the theater and see it or rent it. Well, we can make our own decision. We don't need Dianne Feinstein or any other government employee telling us what we can or cannot see. That is our choice. We see out in Brazil, there are thousands of people taking to the streets, and they're basically protesting because they want Dilma Rousseff removed from government. This is the third protest that they're having, and I don't mind protest if it's grassroots. But when it's created by another foreign government like the U.S., trying to remove certain government officials to put in a puppet regime, I am against that. So if it was truly a true grassroots uprising, saying that this government is no longer for the people, I have no problem. But this, to me, continually looks like it's being pushed by the United States. Just like in Venezuela, just like in Ukraine, just like in Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Syria. It goes on and on. We see a lot of propaganda now coming out of South Korea and the United States, demonizing North Korea once again, because right now there are planned military exercises in South Korea, and they're saying that North Korea has issued new nuclear threats and says it's ready to use its latest weapons, which are unknown to the world. Because what's happening right now, there are drills going on, which is U.S.-led exercises, which involve South Korea, Australia, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, France, New Zealand, and UK, and they're taking place this week. It's called Freedom Guardian. And of course, whenever a nation is going to attack another nation, they tell you they're going to do it. This is how you know it's propaganda. If a country was going to attack another country, they don't broadcast it. They do it in secrecy. They don't tell you that we have weapons that are unknown to the world. They just use them. This whole thing is complete propaganda. That is what we are seeing right now. Now, out in Ukraine, Ukraine is one of the top 3 economies that are most likely going to default. The other economy is Greece, Venezuela, and of course Ukraine. And if you look at this, you see that, yeah, Venezuela is being hurt. Greece and Ukraine, they are in so much debt. The central bankers have taken over their country, and these countries will never be able to survive. They're just going to have more and more debt piled onto these countries. And yeah, they will most likely default. But of course, the central bankers will never let this happen. They'll continually pile on debt until they get a war started. And this is what's happening right now. Now, Poroshenko is very angry at Putin. Well, there's nothing new there, because Putin is going to visit Crimea. And Poroshenko is upset because Putin doesn't have permission to visit Crimea. Well, Crimea is no longer part of Kiev, Ukraine. And Putin can visit Crimea whenever he wants, just like the French officials visited Crimea. The problem is Kiev doesn't recognize Crimea as part of Russia. And they're making a big stink, saying now anyone that visits Crimea is banned from entering Ukraine. Well, I don't really think anyone really cares, because they're looking at Crimea saying everything is fine there. The economy is fine. Things are not happening the way Poroshenko is portraying them. And we know why this is being done, because their mission is to get the southeastern region and Crimea. Now, Ukraine is continually, non-stop shelling different areas in Donetsk. They have not stopped. The city of Gorlovka in the Donetsk area is continually being shelled, and all the surrounding areas, they're using tanks, Grad missiles, you name it, it's being done. And this is in complete violation of the Minsk II ceasefire. At this point, the Minsk II ceasefire doesn't really exist. It looks like we are full-blown back into a war in Ukraine. The Pentagon is planning to expand the number of daily flights from 61 to as many as 90, and they're going to be putting drones up to keep an eye on Ukraine. And we have to remember, the U.S., NATO, they have satellites right above. They have drones flying around, keeping an eye on everything. And if there were truly pictures of Russian soldiers, Russian military assets, they would be all over the internet. It would be on the corporate media, showing the troops, the tanks, you name it. But guess what? There aren't any. And Putin realizes that things are getting out of hand right now. He's calling an emergency meeting because of the tensions in Ukraine. He's going to try to tamp this down because he realizes that this thing is going to go full-blown. And this time, they're not going to stop. You have to remember the U.S., the UK, other nations are in there training the forces. And they're not just training the National Guard anymore. They're training the army. Lethal weapons are coming in from Poland and other nations. And they're ready to go full tilt on the southeastern region. And then they will turn toward Crimea. We see in Afghanistan, Brigadier General Wilson Schaffner, he is the latest U.S. official, warning that the Islamic State is growing increasingly powerful in Afghanistan. And they are commanding huge territories that they have basically captured. We can see what they're doing right now. And we know the U.S. troops were never leaving Afghanistan. Now they're making the case of why they need to come back. And we see from a lot of the officials, they're out there saying that, yes, the Islamic State is in Afghanistan. But really, it's a small little tiny group. What they're really saying is that the people inside the country are rising up. And we can never leave Afghanistan. The bilateral security agreement was signed. The troops are not held liable now in Afghanistan. We can bring troops back into Afghanistan. So they have to make the case. And we knew they were never going to leave. We knew they were never going to give up the poppy fields, which they use to create opium, which they sell all over the world to pay for their covert operations. And we know they're not going to give up the lithium mines, the copper mines, the oil, the strategic location. And we realize once they've captured a country, they're never leaving. When I say they, United States government, central bankers. We see that the U.S. now is boosting support in Yemen. The Obama administration provides intelligence, munitions, mid-air fueling to the coalition aircraft. U.S. warships have a complete blockade in the Gulf of Aden. Human rights organizations are saying that this complete blockade is really cutting off the basic commodities, including food, fuel, and it's adding to the nation's misery. Yes, because they want the people to suffer there because they didn't do what they wanted. They wanted the puppet government to stay in power. Now, you kick the puppet government out, you will pay. You will suffer until you bring that puppet government back. This is what they're doing at this point. And they're going to continue on until they get that government back into power. Now, Russia and Iran, they agreed to coordinate efforts to fight the Islamic State. This is coming from the Russian Foreign Ministry. And they're saying that they're going to join forces. This will help to more closely coordinate efforts of the two countries aimed at mainly at facilitating settlement of the conflicts in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, stepping up joint fight against the terrorist threat posed by the Islamic State and other extremist groups. Now, this is going to be a problem for the United States government central bankers because, as we know, the Islamic State is a proxy army. And they do not want them defeated. They need them to continue with the chaos in all the different countries and to use them in Syria. This is why they left Iran, Russia, China out of the picture. And now Putin is pushing and saying, we are going to help. We're going to help destroy the Islamic State. And this is why everything is accelerating right now. Now, to make things even worse for the United States government central bankers, Russia decided to fulfill their contract with Syria. So Russia is going to supply Syria with supersonic MiG-31 fighter interceptors, fulfilling their contract in 2007. Russia and Syria signed two agreements worth $1 billion for the supply of a MiG-29M and MiG-31. The deliveries of the MiG-29 are underway, but those of the MiG-31s were reportedly delayed because of pressure from Israel. Putin said, you know something? Make the delivery. So 6 MiG-31 jets have already landed in Damascus, and they are going to patrol the Syrian airspace. They're going to protect the airspace, and these MiG-31 jets are capable of controlling the airspace on a 450 to 550 mile radius. So we can see already he's upping the ante at this point because he realizes that the United States government, they're not looking for peace. They're not looking to make a deal. They're looking to remove Assad. And if they have to do it by force, they will. This is why they have only one thing on the agenda, and that is for Assad to step down. Now, the supreme leader of the Iranian Islamic Revolution, Khamenei, he is out there saying, we know what the American plans are. They want to split up and divide Iraq and Syria, and they're saying that this is not going to happen. And that is the plan. They're planning on separating Iraq, Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria into Sunni, Shiite, and Kurdish. So this way we have none of this fighting. We understand the United States is continually using propaganda against Assad. Well, they need to because they have nothing else that they can use to have him step down. So they have to make it look like he is a dictator. He's evil. He's torturing people. He's using gas on his own people. Of course, they have no proof for all this. Yes, they show the photos. Yes, they show people that have been poisoned. But this isn't proof. This is the aftermath. They don't show the link to him. Actually, all the reports that we're getting is that the Islamic State is using chlorine and mustard gas. Now, of course, once that comes out, they say, oh, they must have gotten it from Syria because they still have a stockpile. Now, there was a recent bombing, and the United States is condemning Syrian government because they hit a town outside of Damascus where it left nearly 100 dead. And they are reiterating that this is why Assad needs to go. And this is coming from State Department spokesman John Kirby, who said yesterday's airstrikes, following its other recent market bombings and attacks on medical facilities, demonstrate the regime's disregard for human life. As we have said, Assad has no legitimacy to lead the Syrian people. And they keep playing on this over and over and over. And of course, when you only hear one side, you think, yes, oh my God, he's bombing his own people. Well, no, most of the time, it's not Assad. Actually, if you look at some of these reports, and this report is from a non-profit group called Air Wars, which tracks coalition airstrikes on Iraq and Syria, they have already documented 459 to 591 civilian deaths in 52 credible incidents by the U.S. and the coalition forces. So let me see. They're saying Assad must go because of 100 dead. They can't prove that it was Assad because why would he bomb his own medical facilities? Why would he bomb his own people who voted and elected him into power? It makes no sense. And they're playing up this 100 dead when there are reports out there that there's over 600 people that have died. I mean, Air Wars also noted that the coalition officially estimates more than 2,000 buildings destroyed. Now, you think there's no one in these buildings? They're just completely empty. We know there are people in there. Think about all the drone strikes that hit innocent people. Actually, let's go back in time here. And let's go back to the beginning of this war. Now, just to remove Assad, the United States funded the Free Syrian Army, which they pretended they weren't doing, which came out later that, yes, they were. They funded Al-Qaeda. They created Al-Qaeda. They created the Islamic State. So far, the United Nations has 220,000 people killed. They have killed 220,000 people just to remove Assad. Let's think about that for a second. Let's put things into perspective. In Ukraine, how many people have died? How many people in Libya, Lebanon, Yemen? Think about what they're doing here. We see right now that all these trained rebels are now pledging allegiance to the Islamic State. Well, this is part of the plan. They train them and they go right over to the Islamic State. And they use the proxy army from that point on. They bring their weapons over, they bring their training, and this is how the Islamic State is building up their forces. And we heard the opposition forces, the Free Syrian Army president is out there, and they're all saying that, yes, Russia, Putin, they're not going to back Assad anymore. They're just going to let him go. And we're hearing from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, saying that, no, Moscow does not agree to the precondition that calls for Syrian President Assad to step aside. We're not agreeing to that. He said that the Russian position has not changed on Syria, and a solution to the conflict should come without outside interference or any kind of preconditions. Well, I hate to say this, but the United States central bankers only have preconditions. They went into the Geneva II talks with one condition: Assad step down. Since he's not going to step down, the United States government central bankers are going to start war. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.